Welcome to the workshop on building information modeling using Autodesk Revit. It is my distinct pleasure this morning to introduce you to Mr. Tom Kemp from Advanced Solutions, who happens to be also Kemp alum. Please help me to greet him warmly with a big applause.
Thanks. Good morning. Thanks for coming out fairly early on a Thursday morning. A few things before I get into a little bit of background and we get into the presentation. This is our schedule for the day. Typically, this class, what I want to try and get through today in a professional setting, we get through in about 3 days. So this is really a shotgun approach. We're going to move quickly through some things. I'm going to be working with Revit 2015. Has anyone worked with Revit before? A few of you. Does anyone have Revit installed on their computers? A bunch of you? Okay. Feel free to follow along. I'm going to move pretty quickly though, so if anyone has any questions, feel free, shout out, throw something at me, stop me. That I've got a few slides, and then I'm going to be live in Revit, working through some things, showing you how to be productive and get some things done. So, few little housekeeping things. If you make it through the day, we've got a course evaluation. They'll ask you to fill out. It's, I don't know, half a dozen questions. It's not that bad. There's also, if you put your email on there, there's an assessment that you can take online. Helps us get some feedback on what we're presenting. It's 20 multiple choice questions. It's not that big deal, and you get a certificate suitable for framing. So Autodesk has a new academic partner program, and Advanced Solutions is an academic partner. There's a website there with some information. You can get free academic use software, and there's some certificate programs and different things. If you're interested in that, check that out. Okay. A little bit about me. I am a registered architect in the state of Indiana, and Texas I think is still fairly current. I've worked in architecture offices since probably before most of you were born. All these projects on the right, not all of those images are from Revit, but all of those projects were done using Revit. So everything from interior remodel projects to high-rise projects, higher education projects, so full range of project experience there. So building information modeling. Revit is a building information modeling model authoring program, and what building information modeling is, there's a little definition there. Creation and use of coordinated, internally consistent, computable information about a building project in design and construction. And it's really, the trend in the industry now is really pushing towards builders and owners and how they're using BIM. That's where the growth is in applying this technology. Architects have been using it for 10 plus years, and it's working its way, and contractors are seeing how they can use the models that we're building to help them on projects and build things more efficiently, cheaper, whatever. The big thing here that's highlighted, computable information, and this is kind of a distinct difference between a lot of other CAD programs and a building information model, is the information that's in the model and what you can do with it, that you can run calculations on it. You can do analysis, energy analysis, structure analysis, all those sorts of things based on the information in the model. And that's a distinct difference between, AutoCAD and Revit and some other CAD programs out there. Okay. Related to that, when you're working in Revit, instead of being focused on the drawings, if you've second year, you probably haven't had a lot of office experience. In the past, in a production environment, you really, when you're working in that construction document phase, which is, where most of the manpower is spent, you're really focused on what the drawings are, what that deliverable is going to look like. Revit kind of turns that around a little bit, and instead of being focused on what the drawings look like, it's really focused on what the model is, and the drawings kind of are almost a byproduct of that. So it changes from a drawing-centric production environment to a model-centric environment. Okay? That changes where we spend our time on a project. Okay? This curve kind of outlines how BIM has changed where manpower is spent in architectural practice, or where it needs to be spent. We've got the green and the red curve that represent the cost to make a design change and the ability to impact functional capabilities and cost with a change. And traditionally, this black curve represents how manpower is typically spent in architectural practice, and we've got most of our time spent during the CD phase, and we're outside both of these green and red curves, which is not where you want to be, because it costs more to make a change, and you have less ability to make a change and impact the design. So BIM pushes that time closer to the beginning of the project, where we can use the tool to make better decisions, make more informed decisions, do analysis earlier, let that analysis impact the design, all of those good things. So a few highlights on the interface, and before we get into the application a little bit, just a quick overview. If you haven't looked at Revit before, this is kind of what the interface looks like, and I'll step through these really quick. Across the top here, you got a quick access toolbar. All of the most frequently used commands like save and those sorts of things are up there, and they're always up there. Number 2 over here is Info Center. We'll talk about later on today. We'll talk about rendering and using the cloud rendering. And that's where your login, if you're using any of those cloud tools, that's where your login is there, and help and all those things. Application menu, typical Windows interface. Here we've got a drop-down application menu with your print and save and all those standard things. The ribbon across the top here, this will change contextually depending on what command you have picked, what element you have picked, and we'll see a little of that when we get in live. Okay. Number 5 here is this bar right above the drawing area, the option bar. I call it the overlook bar because it changes based on what you have picked, and a lot of times it gets overlooked. There's common options and stuff will show up in that bar, and a lot of times it's easy to overlook what those options are. So then over here on the left, we've got our properties window and our project browser, and we'll look at those in more detail live. Those you can move those around. Those stay open all the time, pretty much. Then we've got our drawing area here. Down at the bottom of our drawing area, we've got a view control bar where we can we got some controls for hiding and isolating elements, setting scales, some different graphic display options that we'll look at throughout the day. Then number 10 is the status bar. You get a little bit of feedback over different selections and what you're picking and mousing over, and what Revit is expecting when you select a command will be displayed there in that area. Okay. A critical concept that you need to understand when you're working in Revit is the idea of type parameters and instance parameters. So all the information attached to elements in Revit are parameters, okay? And there's two different categories of parameters. There's parameters that relate to each unique instance of an element, and then parameters that relate to all of the instances of the same family, okay? So those that are unique to each instance are type properties, type parameters, and those that are unique for every instance are instance parameters, okay? I've got an example here. So some graphics on the screen of a wide flange column, and we've got the instance parameters here on the left and the type properties or type parameters on the right. So things that would be unique to each wide flange column in the project would be things like the top and base of that column, what level or what height those things are at. It could be the same shape wide flange, but they could have different heights, okay? But the things that are unique to each W8 by 10 are the things that make it a W8 by 10, the flange thickness and the flange width and the web thickness and all those kinds of things that define that shape are common for every W8 by 10, okay? That concept runs throughout Revit, with whether it be columns or walls or doors or sheets or views. That concept of instance parameters and type parameters runs throughout. Yeah.
So you're saying that the ones that over there on the left is the more general for that type of thing, but this is the more specific
Right.
for the specific drawing.
Right. So we have in this example we have a family that is a wide flange column, and the type is a W8 by 10.
Okay, so it's a family as opposed to.
Right. So the instance parameters for that family and type is this left-hand graphic. Okay. So we could have dozens of W8 by 10s, and everyone would have a different height. They're all the same family and type, they just have different instance properties. But since they're all the same family and type, their type properties are all going to be the same. Okay? Does everyone understand that? Because that's kind of an important. Any questions on that? Okay. I'll show this again at the end. There's some resources, suggested courseware that you can get through our website online, and then this book at the bottom, this Mastering Revit Architecture, I have my copy of here if anyone's interested in flipping through it. I think it's the courseware is good at showing picks and clicks. This is probably better at showing concepts of why you're doing things. So if you're interested, I've got a copy of that if you want to leaf through it. Okay. Any questions before I jump into Revit? Okay. So only a few use Revit. So if you have questions, if I'm moving too fast on what I'm picking and clicking on, shout out. Definitely at the end of the day, want everyone to feel like they can, go back to their studio and start playing around in Revit with some designs or whatever they need to do. So this is the start menu when you open Revit, and you've got projects here at the top, families down at the bottom. We're not really going to get into families too much today, but you can you can start a new project here, and you've got some out-of-the-box templates you can work with, or you can pick open, and I'm going to go down to my sample files. And open this little sample project up. Okay, so here I am in Revit, and I'll go through a few highlights on the interface here and show you what those do a little bit. So here in the quick access toolbar, of course, we've got our save here. The little doghouse icon there, if I pick that, it's going to take me to a default 3D view here in my drawing area. So there's a 3D view of my project. Okay. I've got the project browser on the left and my property window on the right. Okay, both of those you can drag off if you've got a separate second monitor. You can pull those off onto the other monitor and get a little more drawing area to work on, which is kind of nice sometimes. The project browser here is, let me collapse this all down. It's a tree structure. You got all your views. You got legend views, schedules that we'll look at later. You've got all your sheets here. Then it lists all the nested content that's in the project, so the individual families and groups, those sorts of things. And if you've got anything linked in to your project, it will list those here. Okay. So and it's again it's a multi-level tree structure, so we can just keep dialing down in here under views. So we've got floor plans, and then here's all the floor plan views in this particular project. Okay. If I collapse this back down, if I go down to sheets, same thing. Here's all the individual sheets that make up the drawings that I'm going to produce for this project. I can drill down into one of these sheets and see the views that are on that project on that sheet. Okay, so this view, this first floor DIMS plan is going to show up down here under the sheets, and it's also going to show up up here under floor plans. Okay. And again, Revit it's a modeling program. It's a database really about your project. So all these views and sheets, they're all looking at the same model. So everything is associated bidirectionally. Okay. What I mean by that is if I make a change. If I make a change in my floor plan, that's going to show up in the elevations. It's going to show up in schedules. It's going to show up in 3D views. Okay, it's all the same model. We're just taking different views of it in plan, section, elevation, schedule, whatnot. Okay. So that is the project browser. Then over here on the right, I've got the property dialog, and these parameters, these properties that it lists here, are the instance parameters. So if I come in here and pick this roof, these are the instance parameters for this roof. Okay. So it's got an offset from a level, it's got a rafter cut setting, it's got a slope. Those are all things that are unique for that particular piece of roof. If I pick the edit type, and I've got this basic roof, Mike's roof, if I pick edit type here, these properties are the same for every instance of Mike's roof. Okay? So it's thickness, it's construction here at the top, all the layers that build up that roof, every instance is going to be the same. Mm-hmm. Which, this one? So this, typically it is docked on one side or the other. It's the properties. If you don't have it, if you go to view on the ribbon, all the way over to the right, there's a user interface, and you can click on the properties to turn it on or off. Okay. Oops. There we go. Any other questions? Mm-hmm.
So if you have Mike's roof, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
a basic roof, and then it shows pitch, etc. If you have another portion of this roof that has a different pitch or whatever, can it still fall under Mike's roof and be a separate part?
Mm-hmm. So, oops. So here's Mike's roof, and it's 1 to 12. I don't know if this is also Mike's roof. Here's another Mike's roof. I could change this one.
So how do you keep them, I mean, since they have the same title, there's no different naming system or anything for it?
It's that name, that family name, or that type name defines all the things that are common about the element.
Okay.
So they're all going to have the same structure. They're all going to have the same, if it's a door or a wall, they're all going to have the same fire rating or the same materials. Each instance may have some things that are different about it. Its height, its actual size.
So there can be a number of records under that.
Right.
for the instance.
Right. Okay. Okay, so another thing when you're working in Revit that you'll work with a lot are object styles and categories of elements. So in a lot of CAD programs, in AutoCAD for instance, you've got layers of things that you work with. We have layers in Revit. Everything is, since we're building a model, everything is based on categories, and when you draw a wall, that element is a wall. Okay, so here on the manage ribbon over to the left, we've got object styles, and this is kind of our global project control for all of the different categories. Okay, so here we've got model objects, annotation objects, and this is the list of all the different categories. We can filter that down based on discipline. So if we just want to look at things that are architecture, and we come down here and we've got walls. Some of these, let's look at doors. Maybe is better. Some of these categories, you can see this tree structure, have different subcategories of things. So for example, the door has got subcategories for the frame and the hardware and if there's glass and all those sorts of things. And all these categories really define how the graphics are going to look for that element. So we've got line weight, projection, and cut line weight. So projection is when we're looking at it in elevation or in 3D, and cut is when we're actually cutting through the element. So if we're cutting through walls on a floor plan or cutting through elements in a section, whatever, that's where those line weights are set. And then we've also got some settings for line colors and patterns. Okay. We can also set the material here globally. So if I want all my doors to be a specific material, I can set that here globally, or I can set it for each particular door in the family settings. Okay. So these are global settings. If I make a change here, it's going to make it through my whole project. Okay. I also have in each view, I have over here in the properties, I have a visibility graphic override setting. Okay. Dialog box looks a lot like the object properties dialog. It's all the same categories, similar control. Okay, this is for that particular view that I'm working in. So if I want to turn off specific categories, for example, I've got some topography in this view. If I want to turn that off here, I can turn that off, and now my topography has gone away, and I just have the model of the building. Okay, so that setting is specific to that particular view that I'm working in. Any other questions? Okay. I'm going to jump to a new project. Okay, so some of the first things that you'll typically do when you start to set a project up are probably to start to lay out some grid lines and establish some levels. Okay, establish some data elements to relate things to. So those are both grids and levels are both kind of hybrid elements that they're annotations, but they also exist in the model. They have some 3D characteristics to them. Now I'll show you what that means here. So I'm just going to put in a few grid lines. So here on the architecture ribbon, over here under datum, I've got grids, and I'm just going to draw in a few grid lines in both directions. And you'll see these, they just, like most things in Revit, they just sequence themselves. So the first ones were 1, 2, 3, and if I change this one to A, it's going to automatically make the next one B. Okay, so there's some grid lines that I can start to relate some structure to, or lay my building out based on those grid lines. Okay. When I look at those in an elevation, they show in the plan. They also show in the elevation. Okay. If I make a change here and go back to my plan, it's going to change that element there. Okay, that's that bidirectional associativity. Okay. The next thing I'm going to want to do is start to set up some levels, and this template's got a couple in here by default, but we'll go ahead and create another one. So to create a level, I need to be in a section or elevation view to do that. And again, on my architecture ribbon over here under datum, I've got a tool for level, and it's just like drawing a horizontal line, and I pick that and it will put in another level. You can see it gives it the next whatever the next sequence is, level 3, and puts that elevation in, okay? That is the actual elevation of that level, so I drew this one 16 feet above level 0. If I want to change that, I can either just click and drag on this and push and pull this around, or I can come in here and type in an actual value. However I want to do that, I can do that. Okay. I'm going to push this up here. So when I put that level in, here on my option bar, I have a few options that I skipped over the first time. I want to take a look at. The main one is this make plan view option. Okay, by default it's checked, and what that does is when I put that level in, and if I put another one in, it automatically creates floor plan and ceiling plans for that level. Okay, so it's gonna give you a plan for that level if I have that make plan view checked. Okay. Most of the time that's what you want, but there's a lot of cases when you're going to want a level to reference that you don't necessarily need a plan of. If you've got a parapet or a high roof or a landing between floors that's going to show up, you may want a level to relate things to, but you don't necessarily need a specific plan for it. Okay, so let me go back. That one, that's fine. If I uncheck that and put one in, you can see how this one that does not have a plan view associated with it is black. These that do are blue. Okay, that's pretty common in Revit. When you see something blue, you can click on it. There's something associated with it. Depending on what it is. In this case, I can click on that level marker and it's going to take me to that floor plan level. You can see over here in bold, I'm on level 3 now. Okay. This one does not have a floor plan associated with it. Okay. And when I mentioned earlier, the levels and grids were kind of hybrid annotation model elements. Okay, and they relate to the 3D. You can see these grids don't extend up past level 2. So if I look at level 2, I see all my grids here. Okay, if I go look at level 3, I don't get the grids. That's because those grids are stopping short of level 3. If I pull those up here, now I'm going to see those grids. So they relate to that 3D space that they're placed in. Okay. So if you're creating levels, you can automatically create views. If you have levels that you've made, or you want to have a view that has some different graphics than one that you've already got, you can create some additional floor plan views. Okay. To do that, here on the view ribbon, under create, we've got a menu to create some floor plans or ceiling plans, structural plans. And I pick that, it brings up the new floor plan dialog. Down here at the bottom, there's a checkbox, do not duplicate existing views. So I already have views for 1, 2, and 3. This box is checked, it's not going to show those levels here. Okay, so if I want to do a level 1 floor plan, I want one plan that's got a bunch of dimensions on it, and one that's more for a presentation that doesn't have dimensions, and then it's got some colors and different things. I can uncheck this and pick level 1 and create a second level 1 floor plan. Okay. all the model elements are going to be the same, right? Because we're looking at the same model. The only thing that's going to be different are any annotations we add, or graphics, or visibility settings that we change between the two. Okay. And as an example, oops, I'm going to go back to the sample project here, and you can see here in the project browser we've got there's a ton of first floor plan views. Okay, there's furniture layout, room types, building code plan, call out plan, dimension plan, finish plan, all kinds of different floor plans here. They're all the same. They're all looking at the same model. So if I were to change a wall, I'm going to unload this. Okay, if I were to change a wall in one, that change to that model would be reflected in all of them. Okay, but all the other graphics and annotation would be unique to each view.
Does it indicate anywhere that you have changed it so that you reveal it? Like on all that plan where you say you changed where a wall was or something like that? Or does it lose your old one? I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like if you're trying to do some planning and you want to try out something in a certain place, can you save that and then also create a different version of that same wall?
There are, right. So there's a couple different ways to do it. If you're, there's a tool to have set up design options, okay? And you can have some different option A, option B, option C, and nest all those things together. Okay, gets a little more complicated to do that, and there's some management of the file that you need to do. If you're just doing real quick design studies, I looked at it this way. I want to save that one, look at it a different way. Okay, just do a save as version 1, make another change, save as. Right. That's a lot of times that's the most efficient way to do it. Okay. All right. Interoperability with other tools that you may be using. So I know you guys are using probably SketchUp and maybe Rhino and what other tools? Not sure what you may be using. A lot of that information you may or may not be able to use in Revit. Okay. Here on our insert ribbon, we've got tools to link or insert things in. Okay, link or import. Okay, if you import it, if you import CAD or something into your project, it's gonna make it part of your project. If you link it, it's gonna keep that separate file. If you make a change to that separate file and reload it in Revit, you'll see that change. Okay, that's a lot of times that's what you want to do, is keep it as a separate thing. You can edit it in its native application and just reload it. Okay, so to link a file in importing or linking it, the process looks very similar. When I hit link CAD, brings up this dialog box, and there's a few options at the bottom. This middle group here, I've got an option to how I want the colors to be displayed, if I want to keep the AutoCAD colors, for instance, or invert them, which is instead of being light on dark, flips the colors a little bit so they're dark on light, or if I just want a black and white. If you're bringing an AutoCAD file into Revit, and it's going to be something that's going to be printed, a lot of times your best results are going to be if you bring that in black and white. It's just going to give you the most consistent output. You've got an option to select layers if you only want part of that AutoCAD file. Import units. Autodetect does a pretty good job of detecting what those units are. If the site plan is drawn as their unit is a foot instead of an inch, it will detect that. Okay. Then over here on the right, the positioning. Typically what you want to do is origin to origin. That's going to line up the origin points between the files, as opposed to center to center, which is going to just line up the geographic center of whatever you're bringing in with the view that you're in. Okay. Typically it'll place them in at the level that you're working at. This option over here at the left, current view only. So if I leave that unchecked, it's gonna bring that that AutoCAD file in as a model element, and I'll be able to see it in other views, in 3D views, other floor plan views. If I check current view only, it's going to treat it as annotation and only show it in that view that I put it in. So depending on what you're trying to do, that may or may not be the case. Okay. File types here, there's a few options. It's not a real wide range. AutoCAD files, DWG, DXF files, works great with those, obviously, because it's all Autodesk. DGN files, it'll work with those. An ASYS file, you can get that from a lot of 3D modeling programs. That's a standard format that they'll export. SketchUp files, it'll work with. So there's not a big variety here. And let me see if I think I've got a SketchUp file. Let's just go here, insert. Where did it go? There it is. So here I've got a SketchUp file. I'll go ahead and bring that in just to show you a little bit about what it does. Try to show you what it does. Okay, well, good example or bad example. It's the geometry. You're going to have the best success working with geometry that comes from other Autodesk applications, obviously. What I was trying to show with the SketchUp file is it treats it as a solid element. It doesn't treat it necessarily as a building, and when you cut a section through it, it just shows an elevation of it. It doesn't actually cut through that geometry. So using those to help define context and those sorts of things can be useful, but be a little cautious if you're modeling in one application and then you want to convert it and model in another application. It might take a little rework to get that detail in there. There it is. That's odd. Any other questions? Another tool that you may use is our reference planes. So reference plane is similar to a grid and level in that it is defines a plane in the model. So here in our architecture ribbon all the way over here to the right, we've got tools for reference planes and setting work planes, and I can put a reference plane in my project here, just draw a line. It exists in 3D. If I go to an elevation here, you can see that reference plane. If I go to one of these other floor plans, you can see that reference plane. It doesn't plot. Okay, so it's a line in your project that you can refer to, that you can base your design around or use as a reference, but it doesn't show up in a plotted output. Okay, you can put them in plan or elevation. So here, if I want to set a reference plane that is here, I can give my reference plane a name. So I'll just call this one mid-level, and then use that as a reference. Okay, so once I have a name, I can refer to it as I'm relating some geometry to different levels. What I mean by that is, if I come in here and put a wall in, oops. All right. If I put a wall in, I can either give it a height, or I can relate it to a level. So a number of things, if you're you can use those name reference planes to relate geometry to. Oh, I skipped over this. So if you're working with, if you've linked files in, okay, you can get to those either down here in the, you jump back over to my other project. Either down at the bottom of the project browser, it will show all of your linked files down here, or on the manage ribbon, you can go to manage links, and it will bring up all the linked files in your project, and it separates them out by tabs here. So I've got linked Revit files, I've got IFC files, which is a kind of a generic format that a lot of applications will write out IFC files. I've got CAD formats, so if you've got AutoCAD files, that's where those will show up. DWFs are it's like similar to a PDF format, and a lot of markup programs will use it. You can bring those in. Point clouds are kind of newer technology, so if you've got a laser scan of an existing building in a point cloud file, you can link that in and use that as a reference. Okay. All of these on here, you can select any one of these references, unload it, reload it, If you have a new version of it, you can reload from and path it to a new version. So if you've got things linked together, you can swap out different versions of that link, newer updated versions. If you're working on a project with a structural engineer and he sends you an update, you can repath it to that new update there. Okay. All right. Any questions on kind of overall interface and datum elements and creating views and all that kind of stuff? I'm a little ahead, so if you've got questions. All right. I'm going to dig into actually doing some modeling and creating some elements here, some basic components. So here on a ribbon, most of what you're going to work with to start is going to be on these first couple menus here, the architecture ribbon and the structure ribbon. I would anticipate. So the architecture ribbon's got all the architecture stuff, the walls and the doors and floors and windows and all that stuff. So let's start with, we'll put some walls in. And when I pick the wall, I mentioned earlier that the ribbon would change contextually. And you can see now that I picked the wall, my ribbon looks a little different. I've got this little green panel over here. This is pretty common. You'll see a version of this with a lot of commands in Revit that have these different drawing tools for drawing, lines or rectangles or circles, polygons, all those kinds of things. Okay. Here in my option bar, I can set my options, whatever the case may be. And I can just start drawing walls. Okay, it's as easy as picking a couple lines. Okay. If I zoom in at this, look at a little bit. This is a generic 8-inch wall. Okay, its instance properties are here. It goes from level 1 up to level 2. Nothing real exciting about it. Okay, I can change this wall here in this top menu of my property box is it's called the type selector, and I pick that and it drops down all of the types that are defined in my project. So this particular template's got all kinds of different interior walls, exterior walls. Okay. Let's pick one of these that is maybe a little more interesting, and you can see the thickness of the wall changed, but I'm not seeing any of that structure. Okay, if I look at the type properties for this wall and look at the structure, you can see this dialog defines what makes up that wall. So it's got an exterior side here and an interior side, and it's got all these different layers. So it's got brick and an airspace and an air infiltration barrier and sheathing and a stud layer, and then on the inside it's got a vapor retarder and gypboard, and that makes up that whole wall construction. Okay, I'm not seeing those layers in this wall, and that's because every view has an option for detail level. Okay, this particular view is set to coarse, and what that means is it's just going to give me coarse details. It's just going to show me the outlines of the walls. Okay. If I change this to medium or fine, it's going to give me a little more detail. Okay, so there's all those layers of that wall now that I can see. Okay, that setting is unique to that view, so I can have one view that looks one way, one view that looks another way. A lot of elements, walls, roofs, ceilings, all those kinds of things, structural framing, ductwork, will have a much simpler representation if it's set to coarse view, and then we'll show you the actual detailed geometry if you go to medium or fine. Okay. So getting back to our wall here, one of the instance parameters, where did it go? Oh, right here at the top, is we have a line location, and this is set to wall center line, and we've got some different options there: finish face, interior, finish face, exterior. Okay, and what that means is what line is that wall based on? Okay, we've got this node here at the end, and right now it's at the center of the wall, and when I drew that wall, this location line here, it's at the wall center line. If I change this to finish face exterior, I'm actually going to change this to the same type. You can see that location line changes, so I can control how my wall relates to the other geometry in my project, whether it be a floor slab or a structural grid or whatever the case may be, based on where I have that location line defined. You'll notice when I'm picking on this, and you'll see this a lot in Revit, whenever I pick, I get all these other controls that pop up on the screen, these temporary dimensions and things. And when we looked at levels, I mentioned when you see something blue, it's something that you can pick on. Okay, so all these temporary dimensions and stuff are blue. If I want to, I can change a dimension just by picking on the dimension and typing in a new value, if that's what I want to do. I've got this little these little dimension icons here that float beneath that. That will make that temporary dimension an actual annotated dimension. So if I unselect, it'll keep that dimension. So if you need that on your drawing, you can pick that and convert that dimension. Okay. Get rid of that for now. The other one here is this little flip arrow. Okay. And you'll see those on a lot of different components, walls, doors, windows, a lot of different components will show that flip arrow, and that will just flip the orientation based on that location line of how that wall's drawn. And that flip arrow, whenever you see those flip arrows, they're on the exterior, always on the exterior side. So if it's a window that has an interior and exterior side, the flip arrow is going to be displayed on the exterior. Look at a couple of these other tools here. They're for the most part self-explanatory. We got a line, and we've got this chain option here. So when I drew these in before, it chained them together. If I unselect that chain option, it's just going to draw one wall and then want me to start another one. Okay. If I have that selected, it's going to let me just keep drawing wall until I hit escape. Okay. You know, rectangle, let's pick 2 corners. We've got some arc options here. This one here with the green line and the arrow is to pick a reference. So if I want to draw my walls based on these reference lines, I can just go through and pick those, and it'll use that to place a wall. Okay. I can also, when I use that tool, I've got an offset down here, so if I know I want my wall a foot off, I can go through and do that as well. Once we have some geometry, we're going to need to modify a little bit. So take a look at some of the modify tools on the modify ribbon. This panel here is where most of those that you'll work with are, and I'm going to start with these three trim options. Okay, the first one here is a corner, so if I just pick 2, just going to clean that corner up. Okay. These are all similar, so this next one, this T, is I can pick one line and then just clean up one end of that. Okay. This next one here is multiple, so I can pick that and clean both of those up. Okay. So a few little edit tools there. We've also got an align tool. So if I know I want to align that wall with that reference plane, I can pick the plane and then pick a line. Okay, and this lock that we see here, we can lock those things together and establish a relationship there. So if I hit that lock, and then when I move this reference plane, anything that wall and anything associated with it's going to move along with it. Okay, so that's one way to you can build those. If there's critical relationships like that in whatever you're designing, if you build those into the model, if you make a change, that change will follow through the model. We've got move here, so we can pick an element and move, or we can just pick and drag on things. Copy, so pick the element first and hit copy. Couple options here. We can hit multiple, which will let us make multiple copies. And we can constrain it, so if I hit constrain, it's only going to let me go in this direction or this direction. It's not going to let me go at an angle. If I unconstrain it, then I can move that wherever I want to move it. Okay. Rotate here. Let's do it. Rotate by default will place the center of rotation at the center of whatever you have picked. I've also got an option here to place the center of rotation, so if I pick that, I can pick a different location for that center, and then I can either pick on my screen or type in up here what I want to rotate, what that angle wants to be. Okay. I've got two different options for mirror across the top here. So this first one is where I would pick an axis. So let's pick that one, and if I pick this reference plane here as my axis, it's going to mirror about that axis. Okay. And I've got, in my option bar, I've got an option to copy that. So if I uncheck that, it would just wouldn't leave this one behind. My other mirror option here is to draw an axis. So I could draw an axis, you know, at whatever angle I want, and it's going to mirror that option. These two split elements here will let me split a wall or a line. So this one will put in a gap. This one will just let me split it. So if I pick split and just pick a point on that wall, now I've got two separate walls here. I can change this one to a different type, whatever I need to do. I've got this option here, delete inner segment. So if I pick 2 points, it's going to delete that middle part. Okay. Split with gap will let me basically put a joint in a wall. So if I hit split with gap and pick that wall, I've got two separate walls here with a joint, whatever that joint space that I defined is. Any questions on any of these? To the arc tools, okay, there's a few different options here. We can pick, you know, the start and the end point, and then pick the radius. We can pick the center and then pick the ends. Kind of depends on what we're trying to do. So this first one, I just pick one point, pick another point, and then I can. Okay. Did you pick wall? You picked wall. Okay. And then over in the all the way over here on the right in this panel. Okay. I'll look at it when we take a break. Okay. Okay, we have an array option. That'll be annoying. So let's get rid of some of this. So we can do an array, and an array is it's going to create a pattern of elements. So here in my option bar, I've got a bunch of elements, and I can do a linear array or a radial array, like if I want to do an arc of seats or something around an arc. I can do that. I can pick the number of elements that I want here, and then I can move to the second element in the pattern or move to the last element in the pattern. So it really, do I want to fit between these two spaces, or do I want X of these so many apart? And if I pick second, it's just going to place those, and it maintains that relationship as an array. I can come back in here. It's kind of finicky, pick that number, add some elements. Okay. Next one here is scale. So when I pick scale, if I pick some elements here and hit scale, In my option bar, I've got an option to graphically scale or pick on the screen, or if I just want to say it's 2 times bigger or 5 times bigger, whatever the case is, pick the base point and it's just going to scale that. Now, it scales the geometry, but it doesn't. It made these walls twice as long as they were, but it didn't scale the width of the wall. It's still the same type. So it's a little different than scale in some other CAD programs maybe. The X is delete, obviously, or you can just hit delete on your keyboard. These 2 items here, pin and unpin, if you've got some elements that you don't want to move, like a lot of times maybe you don't want to move a grid line, or if you've got a wall that relates to something and you don't want to inadvertently move it, whatever the case may be, you can pin it, and it's like sticking a pin in your drafting board in your trace, and it's not going to move around. So I can pick this, and if I try and click and drag on it, it's not going to let me do that. And if there were, see if I pin this reference plane and then try and, since we locked that wall to it, it's going to give me this error that I'm trying to change something that was constrained, and I'm not supposed to do that. So it'll give me an option to cancel or remove the constraint. So if you've got elements that you want to keep fixed, that's the way to do that. If you want to unpin, you can either pick the icon on the screen, or here in the modify there's an unpin as well. Any questions on walls? All right. Let's see this up. How are we doing on time? 15 minutes, right? Okay. Next thing we'll look at here before I break are columns. So here on our structural tab is where all the structural tools exist, and we've got a tool for columns here. We also have on architecture, we can get to the structural column there as well. Okay, there's also an architectural column. So the difference is structural column is structural. So if it's if you're working in an office and you're doing some laying out a preliminary structural layout, you would obviously use the structural elements. The architectural columns are usually more column covers or decorative elements that don't have any load-bearing capacity. So when I pick the column here in my option bar, architecturally, or as architects, we typically think of working from the floor up. At least I do when I'm laying out a building or columns. I'll think of the framing from the floor up and what I'm going to see on that floor. Structural engineer, he's thinking about the loads. He's working from the top down a lot of times. So for and you have this option with other elements, but for columns, for walls, it will default to height. For columns, it defaults to depth. Again, structural engineer is working from the top down a lot of times. He's working on the framing plan and putting columns in as he's working his way down, so defaults to depth. So you can change that to height if you're working from the floor up. Again, you can give it a specific height or relate it to a level here. Couple options over here in our ribbon. We can place columns at grids. So, when the columns will, they know they belong on grids, and they'll snap to those grids and relate to those grids. We can also use this and just say I want columns at all of these grid intersections, and it'll just put all those columns in all at once. And if we go to a 3D view, you can see there's my columns, and they're going up instead of down. What's that? So I got them to go to the intersections by, let me erase these. It's all right. Pick column, and then over here in the ribbon, you pick this at grids, and then I just crossed over all of my grids. I just picked one corner, held down my mouse, picked the other corner, picked all the grids. All that. Let me do it again.
Again, my computer is doing it.
Okay. So columns, at grids. Picked all those and hit finish. Couple of things on just overall interface and selecting objects and everything. So if I click and hold and mouse to the left, it's gonna select anything that I have crossed. Okay, so you can see I mouse to the left here. I'm just crossing those two vertical walls, but it's still going to select those. Okay, if I mouse to the right, it's going to select anything that is included in that window. So here I don't have those two verticals completely in my window. It's not going to pick those. If I mouse up, it's going to pick all three of those walls. Okay. If when I mouse over something, it's going to tell me down here in my status bar, down here in the lower left, what I'm mousing over. And if I use my tab key, it's going to do a couple different things. First, if you're zoomed out and there's another number of elements real close together, it's going to cycle through all of the elements that are close to my mouse. Okay. The other thing it's going to do is if I'm highlighted, moused over something like a wall where there's a chain of walls that are all connected, if I hit tab, it's gonna select that whole chain of walls. Okay, let me jump over to this other project. I think you'll see that a little better. See, I can't really see what I'm moused over. But it tells me down here I've got detail lines picked, and if I just hit tab, it's going to cycle through everything that's close to my mouse and tell me what it is that I'm picking. Okay, and again, if I'm zoom in a little bit, if I mouse over this wall and hit my tab, it's gonna, one of the things it's gonna find is that whole continuous chain of walls. Okay, so useful for selecting elements. Another useful tool, if you want to select the previous element you had selected, if you hold your control arrow down on your keyboard and hit your left control key and hit your left arrow, it'll select previous. Up here in your quick access toolbar, all the way over to the right, you've got this switch windows. Okay, so again, we're all of our drawings, all of our views are in one model, and we can have, I've got two models open. That'll list all of the views that I have open. Okay, if you're working and you're jumping back and forth between a bunch of views, it's potentially going to slow your computer down. Okay, so the tool right next to that, the view icon with the red X, will close all the views except for the active views. So I still have my two projects open, but now I only have the two most recent views that I was working in. So that'll help speed up performance of your machine. Getting around in the drawing area, zooming in and out, and this, let's see if this, yeah, there's I got something wrong with my display driver. It shows that pop up, so let's see if I can pull this over here. No. So we've got there's some zoom controls over here. Most of the time, scrolling in and out with your mouse wheel will zoom you in and out. Okay, and then just clicking and dragging is gonna pan around. So just click and drag. If I'm in a 3D view, okay, same thing. Click and drag will pan around. Mouse wheel zoom in and out. If I want to spin this around, okay, if I hold my shift key down and then click and hold my middle mouse wheel, it'll orbit around that. Okay, whichever direction. Holding the control key will zoom in and out. If I'm zoomed in tight, I wanna orbit around. And if I just hold my shift key, it's going to go around the kind of the center of the model, which is, you can lose what you're looking at. If you select an element, it'll rotate around that element that you have selected. Almost 9:30, which I think is our first break. So unless anyone's got questions on any of that, we'll go ahead and take a quick break.